world.
Recording
so
in
super,
progress.
Super amazing that we have you guys here. We also have an amazing line of speakers today from Microsoft, from Intel, from Australian Securities Exchange, from She Loves Data, and TIPCO. So sit back, enjoy the next 3 hours, grab a coffee or tea, and really enjoy it. Now, since we have speakers from all over the world, and I'm going to perhaps from time to time share you some fun and interesting facts about the countries that these people reside in. So you might get a sneak peek of something that you may never have known from about these countries. So before we start with our keynote speaker, I want to do a few logistics. If you're managed to get onto Zoom, so that's great, that's excellent. So now, if you want to join YouTube, you'll need to do the following. So you should see from the drop-down menu in the top left corner of the screen, you pull that down and you'll see YouTube Live. Connect through YouTube through your browser, and then leave the Zoom webinar. Don't do this yet. Let me get you the full instructions. If you're on both Zoom and YouTube running at the same time, you're going to experience this echo. So if you want to go to YouTube, because it will provide you translated captions. So you go to the bottom once you're in YouTube and click the CC button, which is the closed captions. So it's your choice to pick to go to watch this in Zoom or watch it in YouTube. YouTube will give you the translated captions. You may ask a question in YouTube, or you may ask a question in Zoom through the Q&A button. We have an amazing technical team that will help answer those questions. If we have time throughout the next 3 hours, we'll try to answer some live. So again, you can either ask a question in the Q&A from Zoom or directly from YouTube. Don't try to do the chat in Zoom because that is disabled and we won't be able to answer your question from the chat. All right. So now our first speaker is Nelson Petracek. He's our global Chief Technology Officer here at TIPCO. He helps really shape the development of TIPCO's emerging technology platforms and products at TIPCO. He's got over 20 years of experience. He's worked on delivering solutions for the next stage of digital business, and he's done a lot of stuff in technologies around cloud, blockchain, AI, low-code applications, microservices, and you name it, he's probably been involved with it. Now, Nelson resides in Canada. So for our first fun fact of Canada, let's go. And I bet you guys didn't know this. So there's a town called Churchill, believe it or not, in northern Manitoba. It's the world's polar bear capital. Approximately 15,500 of the world's 25,000 polar bears live in Churchill because of its access to this frozen Hudson Bay. It's also the only place in the world with a polar bear prison. Now, what lands in polar bear in that prison, I don't know. And sometimes the town is home to more polar bears than people. The few residents who actually live there, they leave their cars and their homes unlocked in case they have a visitor. So they need a quick escape from a polar bear. So on that note, I'm going to now take it over to you, Nelson.
Perfect. Well, that sounds good. I enjoy that fun fact, actually. That's I don't know what actually constitutes polar bear prison, but I'm sure it's interesting, and I just can verify that I've never been in it. So I thank you very much, and welcome to all. Thank you for joining. I get the pleasure of kicking off this session. And the first thing that I wanted to do, of course, was thank our speakers. This particular event cannot happen without speakers, without people participating. And so I definitely wanted to thank our speakers for coming out today and sharing their insights with us, and sharing, of course, the information that they have with all of you. So definitely want to thank our speakers. Now, just to kick things off then, one quick slide on TIBCO. For those that may not be familiar with who TIBCO is as an organization, we are an enterprise software company, been around for a number of years. We are present in a number of large organizations throughout the globe. So if you've ever taken a flight, if you've ever shipped a package, if you've ever executed on a certain financial transaction, all those things are actually powered and enabled by TIBCO. So we have a lot of capabilities when it comes to integration, APIs, services, cloud, and so on. We have a lot of capabilities when it comes to things like analytics and visual capabilities when it comes to analyzing data, and also a lot of capabilities around data management. So data quality, data virtualization, data security, data profiling, all those things that you need to do with data. So with that, just to kind of give you that quick overview, the first thing I'd like to talk about for this particular keynote is innovation. And innovation, of course, is critical to organizations today, probably even more so now than maybe what organizations really focused on even a short number of years ago. Innovation is really opportunity, right? And it's not just an opportunity for IT. And innovation is not just about technology. It's not just about product, but it's really an opportunity to differentiate. It's an opportunity to really compete, engage in new ways. It's an opportunity to change perception. If you're trying to change the perception of who your organization is or who it actually works with, right? Innovation is a big opportunity for organizations today. And so when you look at organizations that are truly innovating, they're really being driven towards this notion of innovation through a number of key factors. And the first one is the fact that the world today is moving towards much more highly connected interactions with many more inputs. So it's rare for an organization to operate in a vacuum. It's not just an engagement between an organization and its customers. There's a number of different things that come into play. It's organizations building ecosystems amongst each other. It's their customers building ecosystems amongst each other. It's organizations partnering with other organizations to deliver products and services. And then the inputs, the amount of data, the data that they're collecting, the ways in which they're generating data and sharing that information with one another, that is also becoming much more broad and much more scaled. Just a lot more information coming at you in a very short period of time. So that's the first item. The second item is it's also becoming much more decentralized. Organizations are building decentralized business networks. They're building these value chains, which are, again, very distributed. There is a lot of organizations participating in these value chains, things like supply chains, things like being able to track a product as it goes from organization to organization. And there's a lot of elements here that are really increasing the number of interactions that organizations have across all their different partners and across their entire ecosystem. Right? So this is also driving innovation. Then, of course, you get into this increased need for what I call all of the abilities. So the ability for increased security, the ability for increased integrity, especially when it comes to things like data, the ability for increased privacy and for personal information and so on. So there's this need and this renewed focus on all of these different abilities. And then finally, there's this notion of what's after social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. Right? What is next? What should organizations be looking at next? If they've partially or even wholly, if you will, mastered some cloud-related technologies, analytics, if they are engaging with their customers through different social channels, if they are looking at some, kind of mastering different combinations of all these different capabilities, what's next, right? And I tend to refer to that as the post-digital transformation puzzle. So what is next, right? What should you be looking at beyond some of the technologies and the trends that we see today? And this is really what innovation can help drive. Now, a large part of this innovation is coming from AI at the core. So when you look at the technical foundation that's driving all these different innovative initiatives, AI at the core is really one key element here. And that AI at the core concept is supporting a number of different principles and approaches. So again, you're building these broad networks of functionality that are very decentralized and distributed. You're building new business models, right? Innovation is not just about technology. It's also about how you deliver products and services. It's about the ways in which you deliver those products and services. It's about how you engage. Right? So there's this idea of being able to develop and build these new business models. And then there's all these other, there are technology buzzwords, don't get me wrong. There are technologies that are emerging and coming more into play, things like data fabrics, things like a resurgence of interest in IoT, blockchain, right? And some of these other concepts, which I'll cover a little further in this session. So there's a lot of items here that are really coming to the forefront. But in the end, a lot of this is being enabled by AI at the core, right? And this is not an analytical model that I've just thrown into my production environment and I'm running to get some answers. This is AI that's actually embedded part of the applications that you're building. Now, when you look at that, those embedded applications and some of the ways in which organizations are using those applications, I've listed 4 trends here. This, again, are just 4 industry trends that we see a lot of organizations focusing on nowadays when it comes to innovation. So it's things like digital twins, it's things like advanced analytics, blockchain, distributed ledger technologies, and even IoT and edge analytics. And of course, there's more. I just picked 4 for the purposes of today, but these are just some of the industry and technology trends that we're seeing enterprises adopt as, again, they're driving forward with their innovation strategy. Now, digital twins is the first one that I see a lot of. This is not just a digital twin of a piece of equipment, so building a digital representation of a machine, but it's also a digital twin of a person, whether you're a patient, a customer, a passenger, right? You can actually build digital twins of people. And then you have corresponding digital twins that represent processes as well as the organization itself. So it's much faster, cheaper, more effective to actually manipulate a digital twin in order to optimize for certain factors than it is to actually change the real thing, right? Change the real piece of equipment and probably break the real piece of equipment. Much easier to use a digital twin to achieve that level of optimization. So that's definitely one area that we see a lot of innovation around. Advanced analytics, again, AI at the core. How do I take analytics and how do I use analytics to solve a lot of these problems that are being faced by organizations today? Problems around optimization, anomaly detection, next best action, right? So using analytics, again, in an embedded fashion to really drive innovation activities. Blockchain is introducing a whole series of innovations when it comes to things like finance. So decentralized finance, asset tokenization, and really bringing an element of programmability to some of these concepts, especially when it comes to physical entities. So again, a piece of equipment can be represented as a programmable token. And now that equipment has behavior that's associated with it. Fractional ownership, right? Some of these concepts are really now coming to the forefront, and a lot of them are being enabled by blockchain and blockchain-related technology. And then finally, IoT. I mentioned at the beginning part of this particular session how organizations have many more inputs. Well, IoT is really driving a lot of those inputs. I can collect a lot more data from a lot more sources and then use that information to really drive interactive and real-time responses. So again, anomaly detection, predictive analytics being driven by IoT data. IoT is, and sensors are really driving and pushing the reach that we have closer to where the information itself is being generated. So vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, IoT devices for the purposes of distributed energy resources, right? There's really a proliferation of IoT now emerging in the market. And it's also being driven, of course, by the advent of things like 5G. So there's a lot of different initiatives going on in the market when it comes to innovation. There's a lot of different reasons as to that are really driving those innovation activities. And there's a lot of different trends that we're seeing in organizations. And a large part of this is really being powered by open source. And I call this my buzzword compliance side, if you will. But open source is really a key element of driving innovation. When you look at a lot of the work that's going on in either the areas that I mentioned or in some of the other areas that you see on this slide, there's a lot of innovation work that's being driven by the power of the community. Right? How are organizations collaborating? How are developers being brought together and, again, collaborating in order to drive advancements in certain technology areas? And a lot of that is really being facilitated by open source. And I know at TIBCO, this has been a key element for us, and especially at TIBCO Labs, because a lot of our offerings are actually powered by and even distributed as open source technologies. So we support open source projects like Kafka and Pulsar, but we also offer a lot of our own capabilities as open source projects, things around, especially around things like IoT, data journeys, and other capabilities that we provide. So we're a firm believer in the community, we're a firm believer in open source, and we're a firm believer in using open source to drive innovation. And just to kind of give you an example, there's a number of projects that fall under the TIBCO Labs umbrella where we collaborate with customers and partners in different innovation activities. You see some of the projects here on this particular slide, whether it's around things like process mining, advanced analytics, IoT, augmented reality, some other initiatives. And then we also look at what is that next generation of application. I talked about what's next after social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. How are organizations going to be developing applications for the consumers of those applications in the future? Right, so that's a key element here. And then things like federated learning, blockchain. I mean, some of these items that I've talked about already, those are also key elements that we're looking at as the TIBCO Labs organization. But open source is key to this, right? It's about collaboration. It's about collaborating across a community. It's about being able to test new ideas quickly, but with minimal cost. And it's also about openly validating some of the algorithms that are being produced in order to quickly build up, if you will, things like security mechanisms in these projects, right? To make sure that there aren't too many holes, if you will, in these projects when you deploy them to production. So make sure you stay tuned. The rest of this session and the rest of the day is really around how open source can be leveraged in your organization to solve some of the problems that I've kind of mentioned. And as I also alluded to, you're also going to hear about community. And in fact, I'd like to have our own very passionate individual around community. She runs a lot of our marketing programs in community. She drives a lot of the activities. She's also largely responsible for the OSS days that we run. So, Erin, actually, just from your perspective, I'd like to hear what you feel about community and why is community so important to the success of innovation?
Perfect. And thank you, Nelson. That's a great question. I believe we met around 7 years ago on this very topic. So as you know, and as you said, I'm very passionate about the developer community and what we've created at TIBCO Labs. Community at its very core is a place for individuals who share a passion like technology to come together to share ideas, learn from one another, and inspire new ideas and innovation. At Labs, we've created the developer community around in-person and online events that include meetups, workshops, hackathons, YouTube videos, LinkedIn Live sessions, and this our very own event here at OSS Day APJ. This allows us to interact and listen and create a vibrant community for the individual developers to connect, share, grow, and innovate with us. Because who is better at telling us what they need? It's really the community that lets us know the tools they need to innovate, and that's what drives TIBCO Labs. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Erin. No, it's always good to hear some of the work that you're doing. And again, the emphasis on community, I think, is fantastic. Even just from a personal standpoint, always a big proponent of that particular approach. So just to finalize things, before I turn things back over to Penny and she launches you into the next sessions, innovation is hard. Right? And this is not something that you can just quickly and easily toss together and treat in a half-hearted manner and expect to get results. Innovation is hard. It's not always obvious in terms of how you innovate. In some cases, it can be hard to justify. You've got people, you've got the cost, you've got to worry about how much time it's going to take to have innovation activities within your organization. But as I always say, innovation is hard, but the risk of innovating or not innovating in this particular case is actually higher. So be sure that it's a key element and something that you focus on as individuals and also as an organization. So with that, Penny, I'm going to turn things back over to you. I, again, want to thank everybody for attending. Thanks to all our speakers. Thanks for all the people that put all this together. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the sessions and the rest of the event.
Thanks, Nelson. That was awesome. I just see so many of those trends in so many different companies. I see them merging some of the trends together from, digital twins putting on AI with IoT devices and AI. It's just an amazing types of innovations that's so exciting for the future. So now, again, one more buzz of the just, you have any questions, put in the Q&A. We'll follow up later, or if in YouTube, put them in there either way, and we'll follow up with the answers later. So now on to our next speaker, Devanshi Joshi. Devanshi, she's a fabulous person, a distinguished cloud architect, technology strategist. She really drives digital transformations across many organizations. her experience at Microsoft is a cross industry with background on various different markets throughout the world. She's a senior cloud solution architect, and she works with customers and partners all over the place. She resides in San Francisco. So we're going to do a little fun fact of San Francisco as we go. And I didn't know this. So in the late 1890s, a guy named Makoto Akiwara, I hope I didn't butcher that too much, a Japanese immigrant of San Francisco, he invented the modern day fortune cookie. Imagine that. In San Francisco, they invented the modern fortune cookie, which today is served at the Golden Gate Park's Tea Garden. So if you ever want to get where it was bit, come to San Francisco. So Devanshi will now speak on a very interesting topic. Let me just get to, it's around serverless containerized apps with Azure. So she'll talk about how you can build serverless containerized apps with Azure. So take it away, Devanshi.
Thank you, Penny. Let me know if my screen is up. You should be able to see a black screen with the topic on it. Did I get it right? Awesome. Yep. So first of all, thank you, Penny, and greetings, everyone. In this session, we will be talking about how to build serverless containerized apps with open source on Azure. Let's get started. So based on research by McKinsey and Company, open source adoption is the biggest differentiator for top performing organizations. And organizations who are best in class on open source capabilities score 30% higher on innovation and 20% higher on developer satisfaction. So open source software is an integral part of development at Microsoft, aligned with our goal to empower our developers to be successful, building any application using any language on any platform. And today we will be focusing on concepts of Dapr, distributed application runtime, and Kata, Kubernetes-based event-driven autoscaler, Microsoft's two of many open source projects that have been a part of CNCF projects. Now, this leads us to Azure Container Apps, which is built on the foundation of these powerful open source technology, supporting microservices architectures with containers using any language, framework, or runtime as they scale serverlessly. With Azure Container Apps, I am thrilled to share how Microsoft is empowering you to innovate with cloud native and open source on Azure. The future is defined by accelerated innovation. Now, much of this innovation will be digital and take the form of new applications, and the apps of the future are cloud native. So the modern microservice architecture has 5 core attributes, starting with deploying elastic scale-out apps for flexibility, cost effectiveness, and efficiency. Second, developing resilient, scalable microservice-based apps that interact with services. Third, focusing on building applications, not infrastructure. And fourth, trending towards serverless platforms like with simple code to cloud pipelines. And finally, using multiple languages and frameworks during this development. Today, we are experiencing this wave of cloud adoption, and developers have been comfortable with web and database legacy application architectures. So, for example, the classic 3-tier design, but not with microservice application architectures, which are inherently distributed. It is hard to become a distributed systems expert overnight, and nor should you have to. Developers want to focus on business logic while leaning on the platforms to imbue their applications with scale, resiliency, maintainability, elasticity, and the other attributes of cloud native architectures. And this is where Dapr comes in. Dapr codifies the best practices for building microservice applications into open, independent APIs, building blocks that enable you to build portable applications with the language and framework of your choice. Now, Dapr is a set of APIs that makes it easy for you to write distributed applications. This runs as a sidecar process right next to your application, whether on Kubernetes or any other environment, and gives you a set of primitives in the form of pub/sub, state management, secrets management, event triggers, and service-to-service calls that are secured and reliable. In container hosting environments, such as Kubernetes, Dapper runs as a sidecar container with the application container in the same pod. Dapper exposes its HTTP and gRPC APIs as sidecar architecture, which means components of an application are deployed into a separate process or container to provide isolation and encapsulation, not requiring the application code to include any Dapper runtime code. And this makes it super easy. Dapper's sidecar takes care of the complex challenges such as service discovery, message broker integration, encryption, observability, and secret management. You can now focus on business logic and keep your code simple. So now that we understand distributed application runtime Dapper and its benefits, let's now shift the focus to KEDA, Kubernetes-based event-driven autoscaler. With KEDA, you can drive the scaling of any container in Kubernetes based on the number of events needing to be processed. KEDA works alongside standard Kubernetes components like the horizontal pod autoscaler and can extend functionality without overwriting or duplication. With KEDA, you can explicitly map the apps you want to use event-driven scale on, with other apps continuing to function as is. This makes it extremely flexible and safe as an option to run alongside any number of other Kubernetes applications or frameworks. Now, KEDA performs two key roles with Kubernetes. First, it acts as an agent to activate and deactivate a deployment to scale to and from 0 on no events. Second, it acts as a Kubernetes metric server to expose rich event data like queue length or stream lag to the horizontal pod autoscaler and drive scale out. It's up to the deployment to then consume these events directly from the source. This way, we preserve rich event integration and enable gestures like completing or abandoning queue messages or work out of the box. So there's lack of the portable open source PaaS solutions built for Kubernetes. And with these open source capabilities offered through Dapper, KEDA, and Envoy, we have the serverless container offering called Azure Container Apps. Azure Container Apps is built on the foundation of these powerful open source tech, delivering the same microservice benefits as Kubernetes, but fully managed and serverless app hosting. Now, behind the scenes, every container app runs on AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, with KEDA, Dapper, and Envoy deeply integrated in these hosting service. However, developers and operators are not exposed to this underlying Kubernetes infrastructure. The open source centric approach enables a path for teams to build microservices without having to overcome the concept and operational overhead of working with Kubernetes directly, enabling to continue app portability by leveraging open standards and APIs. So we're constantly seeing customers citing Kubernetes complexity as a blocker from adopting containers and microservices. With Azure Container Apps in public preview, we can build serverless containers. We can be building modern apps with open source, focus on apps, not the infrastructure, and seamlessly upgrade to Kubernetes. Container Apps is the only serverless container solution offering this combination of robust built-in HTTP-based autoscaling and event-driven autoscale to run containers that may be processing messages from queues, streams, or databases. You can run containers and scale in response to HTTP traffic or a growing list of KEDA-supported scale triggers, including Event Hub, Apache Kafka, RabbitMQ, MongoDB, MySQL, Postgres. So scale to 0 and pay for only what you use by the second. This is the old traditional fashionable serverless way where you're billed based on per second resource consumption and requests. Now, you may be wondering what sort of applications can you build with Azure Container Apps? And these are some of the common ones, including deploying API endpoints, hosting background processing applications, handling event-driven processing, and of course, running microservices. Let us now understand the Azure Container Apps components. Now, the individual container apps are deployed to a single container app environment, which acts as a secure boundary around groups of container apps. Container apps in the same environment are deployed in the same virtual network and write logs to the same log analytics workspace. Now, this Azure Container App manages the details of Kubernetes and container orchestration for you. So a single container app within it typically represents a microservice, which is composed of pods made up of one or more containers, providing that foundation for deploying microservices. And this features independent scaling, versioning, upgrades, as well as service discovery and native Dapper integration. While container apps features the building blocks for running microservices, use of Dapper provides an even richer microservices programming model with features like observability, pub/sub, and service-to-service invocation with mutual TLS, retries, and more. Azure Container Apps supports any Linux-based container image and containers from any public or private container registry. However, Azure Container Apps cannot run privileged containers or processes that require root access. Now, containers in Azure Container Apps can use any runtime, programming language, or development stack of your choice. But currently, only Linux-based container images can be used. You may define multiple containers in a single container app, and groups of containers here are known as pods. These containers in a pod share the same hard disk and network resources and experience the same application lifecycle. Coming to revisions, the revision would be an immutable snapshot of the container app. So revision scope changes are any change that triggers a new revision, while application scope changes do not create revisions. Up to 100 revisions remain available before being purged, and you're only charged for like inactive revisions. Revisions are most useful when we enable ingress to make the app accessible via HTTP. They are often used when you want to direct traffic from one snapshot of your container app to the next. And typical traffic direction strategies include like A/B testing and blue-green deployment. This is an example of ingress traffic splitting. Rules are configured so that revision 1 receives 80% of the requests, while revision 2 receives the remaining 20%. And Envoy is used internally to handle this traffic splitting. Now, Azure Container Apps offers a fully managed version of Dapper APIs. With Dapper for Azure Container Apps, sidecars can be enabled to run next to your application instances and provide a rich set of capabilities and productivity gains. Available Dapper APIs for container apps include service-to-service calls, pub/sub, event bindings, state stores, and actors. And this here we see an example of Dapper integration where service A and service B employ Dapper for service discovery on invocation with mutual TLS encryption. So it's pretty straightforward, with number 1 representing the initiation or invocation of the message from service A, and discovering through Dapper with name resolution to the Dapper component of service B, which eventually resolves the business logic and sends a response back to service A through Dapper. So let's now see some container apps in action. Okay, this is the Azure portal. And here I am inside the resource group called OSS Day APJ. These are the resources. So I have gone ahead of time and created these resources, we will go through the process of creating a new Azure Container App experience and what that looks like. And before we do that, let me help you identify what these components are. First, we talked about our container app environment. We will be creating that or use an existing one. And each of the two container apps you see here are deployed to the same environment inside container app envdj. Okay. While this opens up, let me go ahead and try to create a new container app. Right, so this form comes up where you select your subscription, go ahead with this, either create a new resource group, go ahead with one that already exists. I'm going to choose the one that already exists here for now. Put in the container app name. At this time, I'm going to put in demo app DJ. You can go ahead and select an existing environment or create a new one. And that experience ties you to monitoring and networking definitions as well for your resource. So here, if you give a demo name, and you will be selecting where your resource gets deployed through the availability of this service. This service, keep in mind, is in public preview right now, so it's available in these regions only at this time. Let me select East US. If I move on to monitoring tab, here, every resource for tying in the feedback loop is connected to a log analytics workspace that you can configure over here, and also define your own subnets to configure the virtual network for the environment. At this time, we are going to select the existing app environment, go on to app settings. This is where you would put in the image resource. Your container image could be residing in Azure Container Registry or a Docker Hub, or even a private registry, and fill in those credentials to gain access, as well as allocate the right compute size for the application that you would like for support. Additionally, you could go ahead and enable ingress, whether limited or accepting from everywhere, and go ahead and put a target port. So as you create this is what you get, an environment which has apps in it. You do deployment to each of these apps either through GitHub Actions, or you can do deployment through the portal as well from here. Now, at this time, I'm going to come back to the deck. Yes, that was a quick short overview of what it looks like to create and deploy Azure Container Apps. It is super easy for someone to pick this up right away. Not so much of infrastructure plumbing to do around it. And here are some modules that will help you get started with Azure Container Apps. At the end of this session, some collateral will be shared with you to get started right away. Now, with Azure, we are constantly providing capabilities that help meet your needs to work with open source. So with the increase in open source adoption, it's imperative that it runs smoothly on the Azure cloud. On Azure, you can run multiple apps and increase workload performance and security while also optimizing your IT cost. So we want you to focus on building your apps and not focus your energy on infrastructure. I'm excited that I got the chance here at OSS Day to share with you the glimpses of how Azure could be the cloud for developers and IT professionals. And lastly, Microsoft's contribution in open source community spans multiple areas. Here are a few, right from programming languages, data, AI to web. And we focus on cloud native development, writing microservices using Kubernetes easier with projects like Dapper, Helm, and Kata. With this, we are at the end of this session, and thank you for all your support and participating in OSS Day APJ.
Thank you. Thank you, Devanshi. That was great, and a fantastic session. A lot of detail around a lot of different topics there. I will say that there is going to be some information and email going out to everyone on this call. That Devanshi has some great resources that will be included in that email around Dapper applications, around comparing container apps with other Azure container options. Some microservices, understanding the difference between container and microservices, and all these nice questions that you guys had. So look out for that email. She has her contact information in as well, and I'm sure she'll be happy to give you some more information. So thanks, Devanshi. Awesome job. All right. We are now moving on to our next. We have two speakers. We have Robert Melichek and we have Wenyan Ma. It's going to be a quick 10-minute crash type course on an open source project that we have here in TIBCO called Project Journey. And it's using real-time data relationships in an analytics solution. They'll tell you a little bit about that. Now, a little bit about these two. So Robert Melichek, he's our CTO, our Chief Technology Officer out of the Asia Pacific and the Japan region. He's responsible for the corporate technology, technical strategies and the solutions in that region. He brings focus to bring great technology insight and expertise to really increase the business value generated through a lot of these different technologies. He has more than 25 years experience, and he's really got a broad technical knowledge in that area. He resides in Australia, so get ready. And with 14 years at TIBCO, Wenyan Ma is a principal solutions architect, and she really advises customers on really enterprise application solutions. She's been a member of this TIBCO Labs for over 4 years, and she's really works on many different projects with such as, blockchain, federated learning, and all these different types of areas. She resides here in the United States. So my fun fact, I don't have all the fun facts, but I do have a fun fact about Australia because I think it's quite interesting. So we think when people like myself think of Australia, we do think of animals, and you think of the common koala bear and things like that, but you never really knew there are 1 million camels that roam the Australia deserts. And many of them, they really get exported out to the Middle East. So, and if we're talking about animals now, Australia is the home to 21 of the world's 25 most venomous snakes, which scares me to death. And lastly, one more animal, it's the largest cattle station in the world. So lots of animals out there. But again, they don't have polar bears. So maybe that's the only thing. All right, so again, Robert and Wenyan are going to talk about Project Journey. So you guys take it away.
Thank you, Penny. I was just patting my camel. Let me just share the screen, please. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, very good.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So thank you. Welcome, everybody. And this session, we're going to be talking about open data innovation. And sometimes that gets put under the term of data centricity. My name is Robert Melichek. As Penny mentioned, I'm the APJ CTO. And I have with me Wenyan Ma, Principal Solution Architect out of our Office of the CTO. So I have to just show the compulsory disclaimer and we can move on. So as Nelson mentioned before, we have seen an evolution of data, really, and how that's changing in particular, and how we look at that data and what we see of that data. The challenge is now that we live in this new connected world where IoT, cloud, and big data movement has resulted in much of that data being collected at much higher data rates now. That data structures that maintain that data are now no longer static, and they're constantly evolving. And so information that we see is now related, it's dynamic, and it's constantly evolving. So we need to understand how we deal with this new data velocity, the data variety, and the data distribution in particular. And that gives us some very new challenges around identifying relationships and patterns into data so that we can understand the information at a much deeper level. So a challenge of this is, how do you see that data relationship? And it's like a floating iceberg. So much of it's hidden under the covers and under the ocean that you can't see the forest from the trees. So the deeper the understanding of that relationship that we can have, the more powerful the insight will be. Now, with enough of those relationship and data points, you can even make predictions and future directions on what sort of actions to take. But as more data is connected, the size and complexity of that connected data increases dramatically. And the relationships therefore become a lot more complicated to store and query. And this is a real big driver in the IT world, for example, of how do we deal with this data now? So what we're seeing is a lot of those traditional ways are no longer good enough. We need to think about some new ways to innovate and represent the data and analyze that data. So we need more flexible ways to answer questions with dynamic data structures and support those transformations. They include things like natural language processing, for example. We need to be able to discover the identity of complex patterns from highly connected and also widely distributed data that may be leveraging hybrid cloud architectures, for example. And then we want to apply advanced analytics and AI. But we have to maintain data privacy, confidentiality, governance. So there's some real large challenges to solve here. Now, what Wenyin's going to talk about shortly is, well, that we also need to enable organizations and individuals to share and contribute sensitive data while preserving that privacy and confidentiality, as we mentioned before. And this really brings up this term of federated learning. And we need to be able to augment the existing data and generate new data to create large amounts of diversified data for research or to address those class imbalance problems and classifications and et cetera. And this is really the realm of synthetic data. So if we have seen this re-emergement of graph technology to address some of those previous shortcomings, so how can a graph help us look at that data differently? Well, the graphs allow us to transform a complex and web of dynamic data into a meaningful and understandable set of relationships. And importantly, they allow us to tie together things like streaming analytics with contextual data in real time, not just historical big data at rest. We need to be able to facilitate things like efficient entity link analysis, which is dynamically triggered by areas in areas like event occurrence and actions, for example. And we want to be able to eliminate things like complex joins and self-joins in the traditional relationship data models to give us a lot of the performance benefits that we see out of the graph-based technology. Now, graph technology is not new, but I think a lot of people may not realize how prevalent it is. Many of the companies now use graph technology to deal with their really large data sets, and especially around high velocity of information. Some of these include things like organizations like Amazon, Google, Facebook, eBay, Instagram, and et cetera, all leveraging data and the relationships between the data. So from a TIBCO perspective, we found that you really need to rely more on the artificial intelligence and the machine learning insight in those data relationships to drive a lot of that decision making. So how could we tie that into these new data constructs? So under the TIBCO Labs umbrella at TIBCO, we've built this new project called TIBCO Labs Project Journey. And that allows us to manage data in new and innovative ways using graph technologies under the covers to create those highly personalized real-time experiences. So this technology can be used in things like operational optimization, track and trace, dynamic real-time fraud or risk analysis, or customer interaction. So like the next step after customer experience or next best action, for example. Now, importantly, coming back to why we're here as well, it is a completely open platform. It's cloud native, it's AI driven, okay? Now, it will leverage those very large data sets, both historical, your data marts, and some people call them their data swamps, for example, and also those real-time information streams. And we can understand the relationship, so then we can predict, we can measure, we can recommend, we can analyze, and we can take predictive actions. So this is being applied into areas like what we call data journey, customer journey, crime, transport, emergency management, and a very topical one at the moment around healthcare, for example. So now I'm going to pass over to Wenyan for a introduction into the federated learning and synthetic data areas. Wenyan?
All right, thanks, Robert. So as Robert just presented, in order to get a full picture of the journey of things, a lot of data need to be collected and analyzed. But sometimes many of these data points are owned by external organizations. So data sharing across organizations presents a great challenge regarding like data ownership, data privacy, data confidentiality. So federated learning is a machine learning technique that used in machine learning to address this challenge. So the diagram you saw here basically to show conceptually how federated learning works. So in federated learning, the data stays on the local devices or machines. Instead, the model is pushed to these local devices to train with the local data. Then the model updates get pushed to a centralized server where the weights are aggregated. And then the updated model get pushed back to these local devices to be trained further. So the process iterates until the training is completed. Next, please. So at TIBCO, we created a TIBCO federated learning project. It is built to facilitate the collaborations between data owners and data modelers. And it is also used to automate federated learning tasks. It supports Intel federated learning framework. Interested parties can use this cloud application to connect with each other, to negotiate the terms, and then to form a federated learning network. Then these the federated learning, the tasks and the runtimes get pulled by a agent that run on the local machine, right? So the algorithm and the models get pushed down to the local machine to train on these the data that's located on these local machines. So the entire process is very secure. We build it so that only the parties that are authorized can only authorized party can participate in this federated training process. Okay. Next. So this is a synthetic data generation. So this is just another technique that we can use to address data scarcity or unbalanced data challenges. So in some cases, let's say if you have existing data, then we can apply statistical models or machine learning algorithms to train on these input original data, and then to learn the patterns, to learn the relationships between these different fields to generate new data. But in some cases that we just don't have existing data at all. Sometimes, as for example, if you need testing data for a product that has not been launched, right? In that scenario, what you can do is that you can use the knowledge from public research or from your internal expert experience, and then to define the rules and then the likely data distributions. Then we can use those rules and then the data distribution to generate the output, the synthetic data. Okay, next. So just like the federated learning project, the typical synthetic data project is built as a cloud application. User can use this the management console to define the metadata or the rules about the data set you need to generate. Then we have, so once you define the tasks, we have an agent that's also running on your local machines to pull these jobs down to the local machine to train on your existing data. And then once the synthetic data is generated, it is used to compare with the original data to measure the matrix about the data utility or data privacy. And then these matrix are updated back to the cloud application so the user can review how close the synthetic data is close to the original data. But the data, the real data or the synthetic data will always remain on your local machine to remain private. Okay, so that's the really very high level about these two open source projects we're working on. So now back to Robert.
Thanks, Wenyan. I think we're going to see a lot more in the industry around federated learning going forward. So look, just sort of wrapping up, we only had a very short time. So some of the key takeaways that I wanted to talk about was Project Journey was really looking at real-time data relationships. We build that on our connected intelligence platform. So understanding how we can power that with innovative open data integration and analytics components. More and more we see that these solutions have to be on an open architecture. They need to be cloud native. They need to be ML driven. And you have to be able to also support hybrid deployments. One of the things that I'll say, very important as well, is that we provide sort of templates to fast start this, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time. And that's really important. And then lastly, the federated learning and synthetic data are two of the techniques tying into the open data that it really allows data to be shared while preserving data privacy and confidentiality. And we've also seen how data is changing with the result of regulations, things like CDR and GDPR. Security and confidentiality is becoming critical for everyone to think about. Lastly, I just wanted to bring up the resource page as well. We've listed some of the resource links where you can get more information on these topics. And I will do a shout out. Please join us on our quarterly webinars where we discuss new trends, technologies, and solutions. And with that, thank you for your time. And I'll hand back to Penny.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. It's interesting how that project's based on some open source, and really I've seen this before and how it's advanced over the years. So moving along, I'm excited to announce the next speaker. So the next speaker is from the Australian Securities Exchange, which I mentioned that we would have someone. Also commonly referred to as ASX. So ASX is one of the world's top 10 exchange groups. It's an integrated exchange offering, listings, trading, clearing, settlement, technical and information services, technology data, you name it. Our speaker today is David Campbell. He is the Chief Technology Officer for ASX, and he's responsible for enterprise architecture solutions and the quality engineering and technology standards and practices there. He's also responsible for the technical delivery within ASX Majors projects. And he's really an initiative of supporting all the company's technology modernization programs. So he's going to be speaking on a really nice topic about open source software for operation resilience. And so David, welcome to OSS Day and take it away.
Great, thank you very much. And hello everyone, it's great to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you are in Asia Pacific. And I managed to get the back half of Rob's presentation there as well. So very, very interesting. It's great to be. There are also no camels in Sydney that I've seen ever penny. So that's a great and interesting fact. But I haven't seen one in the wild in Sydney except in a zoo. Okay, so today I'm going to talk on the topic of leveraging open source software for operational resilience. And when I spoke with Rob earlier on around supporting this initiative today, we felt that one of the unique aspects ASX may be able to bring to the table was how we think about open source software in an environment where operational resilience, very high throughput, and supporting a large market was absolutely core business and mission critical for us. So I'm really going to be zoning in on that piece around open source technology. High. Okay, so as Penny mentioned, the ASX operates at the heart of Australia's financial markets. It's an integrated exchange, top 10 globally, delivers consistent and resilient earnings. We have world-class financial market infrastructure and a history of innovation and investing in new technology. And really, I'm going to talk about three things today. Firstly, with your indulgence, I'm going to spend a few minutes just going through the broad arc of the history of technology innovation at the exchange. We can point back to about 150 years of technology innovation, which is something that not a lot of organisations can do. That goes all the way back to pen and paper, but nonetheless, it's quite an interesting story and shows how exchanges have actually been at the forefront of technological innovation for a very long period of time. I'm then going to touch on our recent technology modernisation program, which we've been running since around 2016, 2017. And just to give a sense of how that's helped us both reduce technical debt and also standardise and modernise and move to a more contemporary software architecture and in many ways reliant upon open source software. And finally, I'm going to dive a little more deeply into those open source software and sort of walk through some of the key software we've selected, some of the things we look for as we consider open source, some of our lessons learned and how we're taking some of those forward as well. So as I mentioned, the ASX has a long and proud history of innovation. The image on the far left there is actually the original share registry for BHP, a company that's still around today. That was around the 1890s. In 1934, we introduced teleprinters in our state-based offices. And for those of you that know Australia, it's an incredibly large landmass, and so they're often dealing with distribution of infrastructure and information. So we're actually ahead of the curve in 1934. I'm proud to say I wasn't there at that time, despite my grey hair, but nonetheless, a history of innovation there. In the 1960s, we introduced our first mainframe. Now that mainframe was state-of-the-art at the time. It allowed us to actually process a lot of our clearing risk arithmetic and algorithms in the evening. And that mainframe is now about 1/20 millionth as powerful as an iPhone, which does tell us something, but nonetheless state of the art at the time. And we used to run the exchange with chalkies running blackboards to mark up buy and sell bids at that point. In the 90s, we moved to a fully electronic exchange. We moved from the blackboard to the keyboard, we like to say. And that was with the introduction of an application called Chess, and it enabled fully electronic post-trade settlement. Some of the gentlemen in that photo actually still work at the exchange today, although I'm led to believe they no longer wear those jackets, which is probably a good thing. And then moving into more recent times, we've established our own purpose-built industry data center where we connect not only our own internal applications, but we co-locate our customers' applications as well to create an industry ecosystem around transactions, trading, data, and cross-connects not only to the ASX, but across our customers. We process over 7.5 million trades on a very, very big day, and we move several $1 billion and operate as the asset registry for several trillions of dollars worth of assets. So I did just want to take a moment to sort of walk through that history of technical innovation, because it's easy to look only at the last few years, but obviously technology innovation is part of the DNA of many companies, and ASX has been very much leading the way in that and continues to do so. This is a similar view of that same slide. Probably the things I'd call out, I think I'll walk through the top elements there around our trading and data services evolution, from chalkboards through to global connectivity. In equities clearing and settlement, we're now moving from what was once paper share certificates, and we're now working very hard to progress our DLT-based CHESS application based on a blockchain solution and a smart contracts modelling language. So this view gives a bit of a sense of the technology modernisation program that I mentioned a moment ago. And apologies for the fonts, but what this shows is on the left-hand side of that bar chart, it shows the age of our top 10 key trading systems in our equities platform in 2016. And as you can see, there are some pretty high bars there. Some of our systems were 10, 15, 20, and moving towards 25 years since they were incepted. And that doesn't mean we haven't been supporting them and upgrading them, but nonetheless, the technology on which they were based was getting very old. And then as you move forward in time from 2016 to 2023, you can see how the age of our systems is getting much, much smaller as we either replace or significantly modernise those systems. And just as a measure, the average age in 2016 of our key systems was around a little bit over 10 years. The average age of our systems in 2023, when we've completed our journey, will be around 3.5 to 4 years. And that'll also be based on a very common set of standard modern contemporary software and hardware platforms, part of which is supported by open source. This view provides an alternate view of that journey, showing how that's contributed to a reduction in operational incidents over that time, with around an 80% or 80 to 90% fall in operational incidents and a 91% fall in severity 1 operating incidents over that period. Now that's also in combination with investments into risk management, IT governance, enterprise architecture and incident management. But it's all supporting and pointing towards the benefits of a focus on contemporising and modernising our technology base. There are some other ways that ASX is supporting investments, innovation in technology. Firstly, as an exchange, we have had the 4th highest number of technology listing IPOs over the preceding 4 years, behind NASDAQ, JPX and NYSE, but ASX has created a niche for supporting technology IPOs in a global market. And we're also just recently launched our Symphony DLT as a service platform. ASX is leading been bringing distributed ledger technology to key use cases in a post-trade settlement environment. And we now offer the core technologies underpinning that that development in a product we call Symphony, which is DLT as a service. The language element of that product is called DAML, which is the digital asset modeling language. And that language is itself open source, and we contribute to that ongoing development. Just picking up on a theme I heard Rob was touching on, the theme of open data and how we take new steps towards understanding and connecting data in entirely new contexts. We have our own enterprise-grade data science capability, which we offer as an open service increasingly to our customers, and we continue to add new products and services to that offering. And we're also investing into innovation in the property and conveyancing space. So hopefully you can get a sense from those views, ASX's long history and support of technical innovation, and even today, how we support that through our business and technology investments. Now I'll start to dive in a little more into the actual use of open source technology in ASX, and I have only listed a relatively small number, but a set of important decisions we've taken around types of open source technology that form part of our technology modernisation program. So, firstly, I'll call out our use of standardised infrastructure and the Kubernetes standard, both on premises and in our cloud deployments. Kubernetes is important to us because it allows increased automation and standardization. It obviously connects, as we would all know, into a modern automated development pipeline and testing pipeline, and allows us to scale between on-premises use cases and cloud use cases quite seamlessly. So that's been a key development for us and underpins a lot of our dev and test and soon to be prod services, particularly as we develop a microservices-based architecture. We then use the Kafka product from TIBCO as part of the TIBCO Enterprise Messaging Service. Kafka also allows us to connect between our microservices and also connect between core elements of the exchange as we flow information from the trading platform down into downstream systems at very high rates of velocity, very large volumes of data. We'll touch a little bit more on that in a moment, but it's really helped us as we sort of transition and use, we think of integration now as choosing the right integration technology for the right problem. There's no one size or one solution fits all, and Kafka is playing an increasingly important role in that, supported, as I mentioned, by TIBCO. Spring Boot, quite common and quite pervasive in the development of microservices. And I mentioned DAML. So DAML is a high abstraction, open source digital asset modeling language. It allows us to model contracts, rights and privileges that can then be used in DLT, distributed ledger technology solutions, and is a core part of our CHESS replacement strategy. So when we think about the value proposition for open source at the exchange, there's probably four key dimensions. One, it allows us to reuse existing developed software. Organisations like ASX, we need to be very focused on our customers and their needs and being very intimate with our customers, stakeholders, regulators, and the like, being very focused on developing solutions and understanding and delivering to their needs. And then we rely upon modern software foundations, which we increasingly see from being able to reuse software from vendors like TIBCO and also from the open source community. high quality. So obviously the use of open source software, open source is about being open and transparent. We very much believe that that transparency drives quality, and quality is very important for us in our life cycle. Agility. So I'm obviously working with changes in software development and providing a pipeline of innovation into our use of software and use of technology. And there is a bit of a, we need to manage that. We can't take on the very latest innovations, but nonetheless a balanced and managed access to innovation through the use of open source. And we've got on the slide here lower cost. I'd probably say it's probably more a question around efficiency. More a question around efficiency and ensuring that we're focusing on, things like resilience, performance, being able to meet our customers' needs, and then being efficient in that and relying on open source software, which has undergone high stages of development and hardening more across the industry. And then when we look at some of the key challenges in open source, maybe challenges isn't the right word, but it's some of the things we need to be mindful of, and in particular, given our focus for operational resilience and staying within our service level objectives. So firstly, it's things like complex license structures can prohibit the use of some open source software in enterprise contexts. So we need to understand and be sure that when we're adopting open source technology, whether it's explicitly or implicitly as part of a vendor product, that we understand the implications of and the constraints around that license. In terms of release management, I've touched on that a moment ago, but obviously organisations like ASX, we have complex paths to release change in order that we can ensure a level of quality into our production environment. Sometimes we just need to be quite mindful of the release processes for open source software and ensure that we can line up towards supported releases in a way that we can deliver that into our environment in a safe way and subject to our testing policies. Operational support, this is a very big one for us. Operating critical financial market infrastructure, we require to adhere to some very tightly governed and very clearly understood service level objectives around things like obtaining support on key systems. And so accessing open source software with a level of operational support is extremely important for organisations like ourselves. Obviously, that's not a one-size-fits-all approach as well. When we're thinking about support for our always-on trading environments, that'll be a different level of support than perhaps something we're using in our development environment. But nonetheless, it's an important consideration for us. And finally, security. And we all know the importance of maintaining a vigilant posture around cybersecurity and performing things like vulnerability scanning on code. But even as the recent Log4j exercise has shown many of us, even just things like ensuring we maintain a current inventory and registry of all of the open source software in use in their production environment, their versions, and being clear on how we can make changes at that level becomes very, very important. So things like investments into CMDBs and maintaining our knowledge repositories very well becomes very important. So I did mention a moment ago our contribution to the open source community, and I'll just touch on that one more time. So Symphony, which is our DLT as a service product, we've recently launched DLT, distributed ledger technology. A lot of people refer to that as blockchain. We call it DLT because we differentiate between our version of blockchain, which is a private permissioned ledger, versus the public blockchain, which uses alternate permissioning or authority mechanisms like proof of work or proof of stake. We don't use that. We use a private permissioned ledger so that we can get much higher levels of throughput and have fine-grained access control in our trusted role as a central market operator. So ASX is contributing to open source DAML. This enables faster application development and integration with the Symphony platform, and enables innovation and allows organisations to focus on building applications that are for their unique value proposition, with the Symphony DLT as a service product capturing a lot of the application processing aspects and the DLT aspects of that application. So I think in summary, I'll just touch on a couple of key points as we've taken our journey with the use of open source software. Firstly, for us, and this may not be the case in your circumstance, but for us, many cases we've needed to adopt open source software which has strong vendor support, and TIBCO have been a great partner with us in that. We try and avoid being distracted with the next big thing. Obviously, technologies go through a hype cycle. It's always good to adopt technologies when they really are through that hype and really ready for mainstream deployment. That doesn't mean waiting for 10 years, but it does mean taking a bit of a long-term view of our choice of technologies and ensuring the technologies that we select, we're going to be confident that they'll be there in 5, 10 years' time for us to be upgrading and maintaining. Build our solutions with a modular architecture to support the evolving nature of the technology. So that modularity means that we can swap in, swap out components. Easier said than done, but nonetheless, the modular architecture is very important for us. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here about adopting automation in every aspect of the software lifecycle. We're very big believers in both developer and test automation, and have been investing into that quite significantly in the past 3 to 4 years. Obviously, it's incredibly important when you start to introduce open source technology into that, with the ability to automatically perform releases, to automatically perform code scanning, and automatically manage dependencies and test execution as part of that release. And for us as well is to always be working within our accepted risk appetite. It's a language we use, but really it's about understanding all of the things that might reasonably be expected to happen and having contingency plans around that. Now, for us in the open source context, that means quite often choosing either technologies that are really, really tried and true, really robust and really stable, and or working with enterprise partners that can offer value-added services around support to help us with that stability as we put those technologies into production. Okay, well, I think that's really all I had today. So thanks very much for the time. Hopefully I've caught up a few minutes and managed to stay on time. So I'm going to hand back to you, Penny.
Great, thank you, David. Yeah, I love the idea of adopt the open source with vendor support and don't get distracted by that shiny object. That's really very key to, I think, it's a success that you had. So thanks once again. Yeah, we're running along just fine. So let's move along. We're nearly halfway. If you could stop sharing, David, that'd be great. Okay. All right. I'm having a great time. Hope you guys are too. It's amazing. It seems like we're an hour and a half in, and it seems like it was just when I just started kicking this thing off. I wanted to give a little plug for our next Open Source Community Day, which is actually May 12th in the US, so it'd be May 13th for many of you. It will be in Austin, Texas. However, it will also be virtual. So if you're enjoying what you're listening to today, then go ahead and sign up for this, and there'll be more information coming in the following months with speakers and something like that. All right, so let me switch gears now, and we're going to have a panel. So it's quite nice to have a panel of three just amazing women in the analytics space, and I want to introduce them to you, and then we'll start doing the panel. So Yana Marie Ziskova, she's an avid data and diversity person. She's headed teams and country operations at Estee Lauder, Sybase, SAS, Social Bankers. In 2015, she said, leaving the corporate career world, and I'm going to start a data consultancy. And she soon followed by a Singapore-based customer data platform startup, which was called Miro. And you'll hear a couple of people that are part of Miro, where she is the CEO. At the same time, if that wasn't enough, she co-founded the nonprofit movement for She Loves Data. And since 2016, they have over 13,000 women that have attended a variety of things, of workshops, certification programs, and webinars. She has chapters in 16 countries and 3 continents. It's an amazing, amazing, amazing thing. Then we have Zanab Masawala. She's got a bachelor's of engineering, mechanical engineering in 2019. So she's just kind of started her career as a product development engineer at a medical devices company originally. And she's now working at Uber. She's now working at Uber. She loves data and analytics. And she's really been a co-leader also for She Loves Data in the Singapore chapter. And then last, but surely not least, part of Miro's management team is Quinn Pham, and she leads the delivery of the data integration and customer data platform implementation projects for all the larger customers in Asia Pacific. So she also volunteers as an instructor for data analytics for She Loves Data. So everything and anything about data, we've got the experts on. So before we get started, I'm going to give you, I don't know if it's my last fun fact, but it's not, but here's a really fun fact on Singapore. So there's a person, a prince, a Palembang prince called Zhang Nila Utama. And he saw what he thought was an island, was a lion on the island. So Singapore is an island, right? And thus he christened it as Singapura, which translates to Lion City in Sanskrit. However, there was no lions in Singapore at that time. And lions were only brought later on in the zoos. And I do know that I think that's the first night zoo, because I've been to the night zoo at Singapore and they do have a lion there. So very interesting. So let's start the panel. So welcome. We'll call you Z, and Yana and Quinn. So welcome to our panel today. So the topic today is on top skills you need to get started in data analytics. And I know this is a hot topic. A lot of people are wanting to do their careers, move over to data analytics, wonder where they can go. I'm going to just kind of read off the top skills that She Loves Data has come to say are. And I thought when I first saw these, it's very interesting because they're not just your standard skills that you think, they are, I'll start naming them. There are, standard ones, SQL, Python, ETL API, ML data science, right? Some of these are real ETL API, I talked about that. Cloud native, of course, but there are some soft skills. And when we were talking, and when I was talking to these ladies, the soft skills are almost as important, if not more important, than some of the technology skills, if I will. So a never stop learning attitude, because this business is changing and you have to have the attitude that you may have learned something, but tomorrow it's obsolete. Business domain expertise, curiosity, critical thinking. I mean, these are the kind of things that, you know, really sometimes set people apart. So let me start with you, Jana. It's a fast moving world, fast moving technology, the digital revolution. So a lot of new roles are coming up, a lot of different ones. They obviously require probably new skills. So what from some of these skills are really important that you see, especially in this ever-changing world?
Well, you know, this is exactly why we started with She Loves Data. We saw that there are so many new roles coming up, and then there is such a huge lack of talent out there. You know, 5-6 years ago, we said like, okay, let's walk the talk and let's do something, and let's put together a webinar, or at that time it was an offline event in Singapore for women, so we can talk about data and we can kind of break the barrier for them. Because at that time we started to talk that data and tech is a part of every job, really. You don't need to be data professional to have some foundational knowledge about data and tech, because, you know, today a bank or a telco, it's actually a software company, you know, when you look at all the tools and systems that you have. And at the same time, we realized that there are many people trying to pivot their careers into data and tech. And with that, the hard skills are not the only kind of entry point. So what is happening right now, what we see is that all the new jobs that are coming up, like digital analysts, you know, people that are called marketing technologists or marketing scientists, there needs to be a combinational knowledge of the technology and the data, and some basic skills of programming and maybe, you know, data visualization, but as well there needs to be understanding of the domain expertise. So you need to understand what kind of hypothesis you have to create for that type of business to create some value and create some, ideally at the end, revenue for the organization. So I think what as well changed is that you are not looking only creating insights, but now we are talking creating actionable insights, which means that, you know, the data do not die in dashboards, but they are kind of pushed into new automation platforms, and they do something to create more effectiveness or more revenue or more profit. And I think those are, you know, as well, this has a big impact on the organization and how they have to think and what kind of workforce they need to hire. Hence, we don't only have the hard skills, but we need to have not only soft skills, but I call it more essential skills. Mm-hmm. To get those jobs. We need those diverse profiles to actually thrive in this digital and data tech revolution time.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's almost like She Loves Data plus.
Exactly. Well, look, we started with the hard skills and we kind of addressed the competence gap, but we realized we need to address the almost like confidence gap as well, you know, some other essential skills. And here, you know, like how you negotiate, how you, not only for salaries, but, you know, for discussions, how you know, as well, move through your career. So another gap is the leadership gap that we are as well now addressing. So, you know, it's evolving world.
It's evolving role, right. And it started out just knowing data, but now the technology has advanced so much that you need to have those, you said, insights to do business outcomes and stuff like that, which is a great segue into you, Quinn. So Quinn, you're hiring several people lately, you know, and
always,
right? You're always hiring people, right? So what do you see that, you know, what's some of the traits that were very common you're seeing? Which ones are changing that you're looking for? How is this whole hiring process, the skills, how is that really, you know, what's going on in this world today about that? So.
Yeah, definitely. So when we maybe earlier, a few years earlier, when we realized that, oh, we do not have enough analysts in the team. By the way, I run the analyst team who's every day working with Python, SQL, and working with our technology to deliver um, the analytical solution to the client. So a few years ago, when we realized that we needed to drastically increase the number of analysts in the team, we really started with, okay, let's get the best coders, the people with the best SQL and Python skills. And even then, we recognize that it is not the way to just only look for people who had the formal education in this field. There are a lot of self-educated people who are taking, the massive open courses and a lot of practice. So we really looked at their their GitHub, their projects, and that was a great way to look at people who have the self-starter initiatives to take courses and to learn about these skills. Some things that changed for us over the year is that we then added more. We added an exercise that we send to all of our analysts because we realized, okay, then we need to benchmark, the skill set when people come in, because, you can say that you are taking 9 months to take some courses, and how do I know at which level of skill set you are? And not so that I can know you are a junior or senior, but so that allows us to look at where is the gap between who ideally we need to have and this person who's coming in. So where do I target their tasks and their learning so we can bridge the gap as fast as possible. And then one thing we realized over time is that, it's not enough just to send an assignment to them so they can complete and send it back to us. Now we realized one thing that is super important and helpful for us was to add on another, I wouldn't say an interview, but a session for them to walk through to us, the thinking process behind that. And I have to say, it's super interesting just to have an insight into how people approach problems. Some people started looking at the data and started coding and get excited, right? Some people say that they actually looked at the problem statement and they thought about it for days, right? And then they start to put together the approach. And that really gives me a lot of insight into this problem-solving approach, which I think all else being equal, if all of the analysts have the same skill level, definitely somebody who has a very clear and who has a lot of different approaches to problem solving will emerge as the more skillful one, because they have a lot more tools in their arsenal to deal with problems. Essentially, data and whatever we do with data is just about problem solving, right? So that's super important for us as well.
So that's very interesting, because it's what you're really saying is you use the project to kind of assess the soft skills, right? Because today there's many people that can learn Python, right? It's everywhere, right? In fact, I just hired someone. He goes, "Yeah, I learned Python last week." I'm like, "You really learned Python in a week?" Okay, maybe not, but it was his business attitude to when I gave him a question, he could really look at it from a very different. And I think that's what it is. It's hard to assess the soft skills when you're hiring without some kind of like that. So even if they didn't have the greatest Python, but they had the greatest business attitude, right? That's really something that sets them apart, which people don't think.
And by the way, what you mentioned earlier reminds me that there has been analysts that we hired who actually did not give us the right answer on the test. On the assignment. However, during this process of walking through, they actually demonstrated that they explained the approach, and as we talked through the process, they could actually think through and realize that, I realized I did not do this, I did not create this table, I did not create this relationship in the table, and maybe therefore this is wrong. And that is also super exciting for me to see personally, because what is more important than somebody who can solve the problem is somebody who can do troubleshooting and who can really, look at that. And that for me is another skill that is actually quite rare,
It is, which is a great, and now a great segue into you, Z. You just kind of recently started your career. And I know, and everyone knows though, everyone wants these jobs, right? I'm sure, Quinn, you get hundreds of applications. I mean, there is a lot that you get. So what are the skills, Z, that you had that you feel that has set you apart? And then those skills that you had, did you use them in your job today? And what has been most valuable for you? Really quite interested to see that, hear that. Oh, I think, are you on mute? We can't hear you. Yeah, better. Perfect, I think.
Yeah, so thanks, Penny, for that. I think for me, and this is really in line with what Jana and Quinn have been saying, I think what my experience of kind of getting into this field has been that the technical skills kind of come into play, and like Quinn mentioned, many people have those, but I think what's been sort of most important, and the things that I've learned as I've kind of moved from more traditional engineering background into data and tech has been one, particularly with data, is how do you tell a story? So not only being able to get the data, clean it, what you really need to be able to do is, one, understand the problem and be able to tell the story of why what the current state is and what you kind of recommend going forward. And that second step is really important as well, which is how are you creating impact as an analyst? So, a lot of times as analysts, you spend a lot of time obviously working with data and the tech aspect is there. But really what the outcome is that you'd be talking directly with stakeholders, management, leadership, and a lot of other roles as well. You don't always get the chance to sort of, meet directly with, executive leadership teams. And you have to be able to communicate at these different levels. One is that level of, the data side and being technical, but also then being able to take those learnings and be able to communicate them back to leadership, and be able to create the impact that you've been hired to do. So I think that those are some of the skills that you can't just go online and learn. You really have to hone in on those skills, and those are some of the most important things that I think have were kind of shown as I was interviewing for the role that I'm in currently as well, to actually being part of the team and constantly working with these stakeholders.
Great. Again, soft skills. All right. I wish we had more time for this. We're really kind of out of time here. I want to thank Jana, Quinn, and Z for this very insightful skills and what's gone. I just want to set a reminder. An email will be coming out right after this little segment, because She Loves Data. It has a lot of great things coming up. I know they have some SQL workshops coming up. Next tomorrow almost, and they really have a lot of free ones. It's just not it's anyone's welcome, right?
And exciting, actually, TIBCO Spotfire workshop in collaboration with Singapore Management University is coming up, so it might be very relevant for this community.
That's great. That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, so we're moving on. So we have up next, we're kind of back to another interesting topic around that TIBCO has been kind of not investigating, but really has some really good knowledge around this. So I love this title. This title is Listening to Machines to Predict Failures. I just thought that was so exciting. And Jing Zhang, our next speaker, he's a data science at TIBCO, and he has knowledge of providing solutions for customers in several industries, throughout all of the APJ region. He's got real world experience. He's developed some really strong skills, the skills we just talked about. And he has a passion for learning anything data science and all the stuff around big data and stuff like that. Interesting enough, he grew up in China and he holds a bachelor's degree from business analytics. So since he grew up in China, I think I have a fact for you on China, and it's a good one. Okay, we spoke about animals before in Australia and everything. And this is just, I've been to China, so this is fine. The first vending machine, it had the first vending machine in the world to sell live crabs. And it was debuted in 2010 in a subway station near Nanjing. Did you not? So the machine sells an average of 200 live crabs a day, with prices pretty cheap, like $2 and $7, you know? And the best part of this whole thing is that there's a sign next to the machine that guarantees each crab will come out alive, offering compensation of 3 live crabs for every dead one that pops out. So keep that in mind. I thought that was very, very interesting. So, all right, Jingjing, let's.
Thanks, Penny. That's a very fun story that I learned from you. Okay, let me share my screen, and I'm going to play the slides as well. All right, hello everyone. My name is Jin Chuan. I'm the data scientist from TIBCO. Yes, I grew up in China, but I've been living in Singapore for more than 10 years. Now I'm based in Singapore. Today, I'm going to talk about some cool projects that our data science team has been working on recently. And yes, the title is like Listen Up, because we try to analyze the audio data from machines to help us to do the anomaly detection and predictive maintenance, to help the manufacturing customers to utilize their data in the next level. The agenda of the sharing session is like we will talk about the problem and the approach, and then I have prepared some demo videos to showcase how it really works with typical solution. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the end. So what is the problem we're trying to solve here? We understand a lot of manufacturing customers, they need to manage their equipment, health condition, and of course, manage their downtime failure. And those failures are quite costly to them. In that situation, we want to help them build an adaptive and self-learning predictive analytics system to reduce the need for expensive human interventions, and then help them to cut the risk of unplanned downtime. And by the research from Gartner, in the few years ahead, actually more than 50% of the industry enterprise will use IoT platforms to improve their factory operations. So that's why we find the need for applying data science in this area is quite important. And why does predictive maintenance matters? The ultimate goal is we want to increase the productivity and reduce the breakdowns and also reduce the maintenance costs. And in manufacturing and also other fields, it costs a lot of time and money to proactively monitor and maintain machines. Manufacturing companies regularly face machine failures and deficiencies, resulting in lower production rates, which in turn affects their performance, profitability, and customer relationships. So this is the high value problem for the manufacturers to resolve. How our solution works, we call this Listen Up solution AI, because we onboard our data from those equipments by extracting those sound data. So it could be running the app on mobile devices, or it could be active. We could activate the system to start sound recordings to gather the pattern data as the raw data to analyze, and then we have everyday like process machines and also the pipelines to help us keep training the AI models. And traditionally, machines use inbuilt sensors to identify failures, but we propose if we can use this audio data, definitely we can augment those sensors with a much cheaper and device agnostic alternative, which is the microphones. So our solution, Lisa Up, is an artificial intelligence audio monitoring system. We built the end-to-end system that detects and predicts machine deficiencies in real time by listening to the machine. And in the end, we can provide the information to make alerts to let the people know when we need the maintenance in the near future, anytime. Talking about the architecture from the bottom to the top, the data tier, we gather data from the sound equipment, and we can store the data in different places. For example, the Amazon S3, and also we can create PostgreSQL data tables. And then we rely on typical data virtualization to combine the data, to retrieve the data from different data sources and bring them to the next tier intelligence. So in the intelligence tier, we have built like typical project Air, which later you will see from the demo is a nice platform that we can easily use the UI to create the pipelines and make connections to the data source and select which models to deploy for the real-time usage. And also we have typical data science and typical Spotify to build the machine learning models and visualize the results in the real time. And the solutions can be deployed in the cloud as well. And the last tier consumption, we can provide the open API to the cloud. And also we can render the dashboard to the user applications. And of course, we can send the notifications via the email or the SMS to broadcast the alerts. So now it comes to the demo part. I prepared several different demo videos to cover the 3 steps. The first one is about collect data, sound data examples. And then next, we want to build machine learning models. And last, we will showcase how to deploy the model for the real time and how to check the results. So it comes to the first part, collect. The data is consumed as audio web files through typical Project Air, which is a solution for running analytics at both the edge and also in the cloud using the IoT data. So this is a short demo videos showcase the Project Air platform. And here you can see we can create a project, and then inside this project, we have different protocols and data source. And then from there, we can choose different data source to create a pipeline. The pipeline will be used to collect real-time data and send it out. I think here we're trying to connect to a Postgres database. Yeah, sorry, I cough a little bit. Yeah, so from here you can see the UIs provides the easy drag and drop functions. And after we create the data subscriber, we can just drag draw an arrow to connect it to another data store. And this data store, we try to store those real-time data from the IoT into a PostgreSQL database. And that will be used for the next steps in terms of the machine learning model training. And next, we want to highlight that the audio data, it can really be the cheap alternative to expensive sensors. Those collected web data can be converted into a very powerful, useful numerical data format. So which from here you can see, we create some graphs. So these graphs, they are we call it the Mel spectrogram. which kind of highlight the frequencies of those sounds signals. And how we did this is like we used the data science platform. We transformed the web graphs into those interpretable formats for the visualization purpose, and of course for the model building process. And the visualization plot you see here, like we use Spotfire as the front end for the analyst to understand the data and the model, to kind of to understand from the visualization. So on the right side, you see the male spectrum. It's the frequencies versus the time colored by the sound intensity. And we can compare the normal spectrum to the abnormal spectrum. So that's how we can get some insights from the visualization. And the next steps, we need to build the machine learning model to identify the anomalies. During our experiment, we tried to apply 3 different algorithms, which is the autoencoder. This is deep learning algorithms that we need to relay on the neural network. The second one is the isolation forest. The last one is the local outlier factor. So these are the different machine learning algorithms we applied and we tested using our data science platform. So how we can do that is, this is another visual analytics workflow you can see from here. And actually each operator, we can embed the Python code and run the Python code in the visual analytics workflow. And this is the example of the, I think that was for the pre-processing the data. And then we have the isolation forest, autoencoder, and local outlier factor machine learning code in those blue boxes, in those operators. And then after that, we can export the models, and we can even make ensemble modeling, which means combining the predictive results from those 3 algorithms and make some ensemble prediction in the end. And lastly, you can see the export to SPDF operator. That would be that's the operator that can be used to generate and render the results to our Spotfire dashboard. So this is how we can bring the analytics results to the visualization layer. Yeah, so this comes to the visualization layer, as I mentioned just now in Spotfire. So our system can be in either 2 stages, like learning or evaluating. So when the system is in the learning stage, the models are self-learning. That means they are actively learning from new unlabeled data. Each model is predicting if the machine sounds normal or abnormal at a given time. Now, if an expert can easily view the model's suggestions by marking any data and viewing the audio. The user is also effectively constructing a data set of known abnormalities. So from the right side, you can see the audio visualizer. It's really like when you select a part of the audio data, that will be showcased on the right-hand side. And you can see how the audio frequency, how their outlier scores and reconstruction error can be indicated along the audio data along the time. All right, so that's about the learning process. And let's take a closer look on the spectrogram, which I said is the frequencies over time colored by the sound intensity and we can compare normal spectrum to the abnormal spectrum, which you can see from here. Like we gather different samples, and then on the right-hand side, definitely we see the the spectrograms on the right-hand side. They have very dark colors on the top, and that is abnormal signal that compared with the normal signals on the left-hand side. And also the maybe the intensity distribution looks quite differently from the normal ones. So that will be some very clear signals from the visualized plots that we can observe from the spectrograms. Okay, so now with this label data set, we can perform a further optimization. From here, we try to provide the cost of false positive, means incorrectly identifying a machine sound as abnormal. And also we can key in the cost of false negative, which means if we are missing an abnormal sounding machine, and the cost can be different. And usually the cost of false negative will be higher, like you miss the abnormal sound. So after we key in, then we can kind of try to check out what is the total cost given by the different algorithms. And then we can adjust the threshold of our models to make sure our total cost is optimal or is in the acceptable tolerance. Then we can decide which threshold we want to keep if we decide to use any of the algorithms here. So that's a very like the what if analytics for the users to adjust, to help them to adjust the threshold for different algorithms. And so last, after we decide the optimal threshold and we're confident to now we are confident to deploy the models, then our models will be deployed back to the TIBCO project here. This will be the last step. We want to deploy the model for real-time scoring and also for predicting on the new income data.
Recording in progress.
To our data source. Okay, so that's how we can create another pipeline for the deployment. And back into the Spotify dashboard, now we can see this listen up demo can really provide the scored audio data and alerts whenever an audio sample is flagged as abnormal by the models. We can even send the SMS notifications or emails directly to the manufacturing floor. So I would say this listen up demo can replace or augment traditional machine sensors simply using any recording device, which is cheaper and machine agnostic alternative. Plus, listen up is scalable and versatile. Definitely can be applied to many different industries other than manufacturers. And wherever audio-based monitoring is applicable, we can apply this listen up machine learning AI to that industry to help them drive more business insights as well. Okay, so that's the end of the demo and my presentation today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask the question.
Oh, that was great. Thank you very much. I love all those models.
Thanks.
Super fascinating.
Yeah,
all right.
I hope the demo is clear.
Yeah, for sure. All right, if you could stop sharing, that'd be awesome.
Sure.
All right, so we're on to our next speaker, which is from Intel. This is Melvin Sun. He's a senior marketing manager in the IoT group of Intel. And he's also a TSC voting member of the EdgeX Foundry. So this is an open source project on edge computing under the Linux Foundation. So he's spends a majority of his times and efforts really evangelizing open source software projects to really help grow developers and edge cloud ecosystem partners. So he does stuff from, you know, edge computing all the way to AI and other areas. So Melvin's topic today is improving holistic UX DX to grow open source software projects. Very, very, very interesting topic there. So I'm going to send it over to you, Melvin.
Hi, thank you, Penny. Okay, shall I share the?
Yeah, please share your slides. Yes. Yeah, and if you could possibly put it in screenshot. Yeah, perfect. Yep, very good.
Thank you, Penny. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm glad to be here to present slides. Today, my topic is about improving holistic UX and DX to grow OSS projects. And I would like to use Ajax Foundry as an example. And Ajax Foundry is an open source project on the Linux Foundation. Yeah. So, developer experience describes experience developer have while using or working on a software project. So, greater developer experience will help developers to quickly make progress for using a project and make build business solutions on top of it. The road of UX DX excellence and is continuously evolving during the past several years. You can see from the slide around 6 to 7 years ago, when we're talking about great developer experience, often referred to high touch enabling, right? This approach helps a lot on developer satisfaction, but it consumes too much resources and it's not sustainable. So you can later, when people are talking about UX DX, we often talking out of the box DX for developers in general. But the disadvantage is also obvious. It takes time. So minimum developer experience need a minimum subset of DX method to only on the initial stage, but it still could not meet the dynamics of the open source project. As the open source project evolves very fast. So to reduce the time and overcome resource limitation to support limitation, to reduce the limitation about resources on supporting specific developers. Developer self-enablement becomes a hot topic in recent years. So the target is to drive a scale due to DX excellence. So holistic DX and the best DX practice throughout the project life cycle becomes the target. It ensures highly valued and easy to use end-to-end experience by the developers themselves. So these approaches listed above on this page are not contradictory. The road to UX DX excellence requires a holistic approach. Okay. Holistic UX DX can be divided into 6 stages, as described on this page. It is along developers the whole journey, from the very early stage of discovery, when he or she just know the name of a software project without knowing any details, till the last step, successfully deploy the project into commercial solutions. So I will explain how we are trying to implement this framework mechanism in Ajax Foundry. Ajax Foundry, yeah, is a project I am working on. These 6 steps move forward as a developer has been engaged inside the project. Right? In this stage, discovery. See, discovery to improve awareness and the visibility of project. Developers via different types of marketing events, social media, and news reports, so that they can easily find it. In the AJX community, yeah, we have launched web pages, marketing events, social media, and the developer zones to improve exposure so that people can easily find it. If we want to engage a developer inside the community, at least we need to let this person know the name of the project. This is the first step, right? The second step is learn and the develop stage. It will provide necessary documents, training lectures, how to, and tutorial videos, so that we can help developers know more about the project. Maybe the person happened to hear the name of a project from a news blog or from social media. There should be a way for this person to easily learn more about it. So in Ajax community, we have onboarding wiki page of Ajax Foundry. And also we have translated Ajax document into local language. Here in China, we have translated into Chinese so that the local developers can easily learn more about the Ajax Foundry. And also we're launching the different training lectures on the Ajax community so that the active developers can learn from the very early stage to the middle level and to the advanced level. The third task we were implementing was to build a dedicated zone for knowledge sharing and Q&A, so that we incubate and inspire the active dialogues among different developers. This helps a lot for developers to learn. So the next step is a tool to onboarding complementary tool to use this software project and build useful recipes and facilitate adoption. In Ajax Foundry, we have identified and introduced several pieces of tools and ingredients. For example, we have worked with OpenWindow to build a recipe on Edge AI. So it's a tool for the Edge AI developers to use. And for the 5G edge computing, we have introduced Smart Edge so that we can use 5G edge computing tools for this part. And also combined SX with SDO for the manageability. In China, there are some networking access difficulties to GitHub and Docker. We're also creating code registry and also local image to solve the networking difficulties for the developers here in China. The next one is support. Support means there should be a strong community support mechanism for developers to get help on hardware and software when this person tries to use a project. In Ajax community, we collaborate with key members of the Ajax Foundry community to launch DevKits program, DevCloud program, so that the active developer can freely access to these resources if they want. And also, we link Intel Edge Software Hub resources as a one-stop shop for the Edge software package. So the next one is community. While developers has got necessary hardware and software support, the successful validation software will happen. And while he have done that, maybe he would like to share what he have learned and share the BKM shares. And when he has become an advanced developer, most likely he would like to share his learning and findings. So in Agile China community, we inspire the openness culture, and we encourage all the community members to share on the regular meetings, on the events, so that we can improve the sense of belongings, no matter for the advanced developers, but also for the entry developers. So, and also we have a design incentive mechanism for the community members to share. And this is a good mechanism for the collaboration. The last one is about solution. And this part is crucial to the open source community because it gives it helps to land the commercial solutions using this open source software. It provides financial payback to the developers and also to the organizations the developers are working on. And in Agile China community, we have launched different working solutions working group to study the business challenges and the business pain points. And also we encourage the community members to work out solutions based on these challenges, including the different vertical of retail, banking, industrial, energy, health, smart cities, etc. And to grow the community large, we're also building a strong ecosystem to matchmake the collaboration among the value chain, with the industrial customers, including the ISI, ISV, and the OSV, OEM, ODM, and also investment fund. So this is a great mechanism to inspire collaboration and also to help deploy the commercial solution with these open source software projects. Okay. Next page. Okay. Let's go through details of these steps. The first step is inclusive discovery. Learn and develop. There are different types of support activities needed for the open source project, like mentioning on this slide, operations, technical document writing, translation, document archive, and also training lectures. Right? And social media is intensively used by the Agile Foundry community to amplify the effect for the discovery, for learning, for development. So as you can see from the bottom of this slide, different types of social media have different strengths and weaknesses, like Slack and WeChat. It's instant notification social media, and it is very popular for immediate discussion, and it's applicable to the community operations and the live discussions, but it's not useful and not helpful for document sharing, for organizing a lecture. While here in China, we're also working with OS China and the CSN and Zhihu These are the community website. It helps a lot on in-depth discussion and knowledge sharing with archive. So, but the lack of video applications, so not suitable for training lectures, but very good at the technical document sharing and translation. And also it can also be used for the community operations. While YouTube and Bilibili is social media, maybe you can even talk about the TikTok. So these are very popular social media. It helps a lot to improve exposures. So people can send instant messages, and people can organize live streaming videos. They can also link to the web pages, link to the website we would like to link. So it is very useful for training lectures, now very useful to improve visibility. And also it can helpful to link the user to the discussion board, to the technical sharing. Okay. This page is about the AI. So artificial intelligence is becoming more and more popular during the past several years, especially on the edge AI territory. So, edge and AI, both edge and AI have a steep learning curve. So we need to collaborate with the relevant ingredients so that we build a reference architecture for the edge AI. So here, EdgeX collaborates closely with OpenWindow. OpenWindow is the AI acceleration tool. So you can see on this slide, EdgeX is the best IoT connector. It connects different types of sensors and devices to the message bus, including the IP camera. IP camera is also a type of devices, right? And in the right side, you can see we use EdgeX camera device services to connect different cameras for the artificial intelligence, especially computer vision. IP camera is necessary, so we use EdgeX to connect and to connect and collect data of these IP cameras. And EdgeX working together with OpenWindow Model Server, OBMS, as stated on this page, for the frame-based analytics. And OpenWindow and the EdgeX work together with OpenWindow Video Analytics Serving, VAS, for the streaming analytics service. So based on this reference architecture, the edge AI developer can lower the steep learning curve to deploy such type of technology in the business solutions. EdgeX is a framework of edge computing, and edge computing is you need to collaborate with other parts of the whole system to build an end-to-end solution, like the cloud side, like the networking side, and also the end side. Here's the example how EdgeX collaborates with TIBCO on Project Air to build the edge to cloud solution. Yeah, let's see, on the edge side, we use EdgeX and the Flogo. Flogo is also open source project by TIBCO. Yeah, so we use EdgeX to collect different types of sensors, devices to the edge box. Yeah, and we use OpenWindow and video analytics serving to proceed the AI inferencing and link to the cloud, no matter it is public cloud, AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud, so that we can use Project Air to build an end-to-end IoT distributed architecture for the edge cloud solution. So the ecosystem partners inside the community can freely use this solution to build, to deal with their business challenges. The last part is about the developer ecosystem to facilitate deployment. So, an open source project without deployment is not a great one, right? So inside the community, we inspire all the community members to collaborate with each other, based on their functionality, their rules. The independent hardware vendors, they provide different types of sensors, devices, and OEM, ODM, they provide edge box, they provide industrial machine, and with the operating system installed on the top, it's Canonical, it's Red Hat, yeah, and also other OS suppliers. And on the top, we build Docker, and Kubernetes, the middleware, and also we build Edge Foundry and open window toolkits for the AI, and we use these ingredients to build CV-based application. And also, there are plenty of UI application programs, which can be designed by ISV. As a system integrator, they consolidate all these hardware, sensors, hardware, and also software, so that they can build an end-to-end solution and deliver to the business customers. Okay, so this elaborates a successful story of a developer and also his organization. It will attract more and more developers to join this community because it's sustainable. It can generate financial payback to the business organization. I think it's an ideal stage for an open source project. Okay, this is the last part of my slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvin. That is really, really exciting about really connecting with IoT devices, which leads us to our next speaker, which is Melvin alluded a little bit about Project Air. So okay, if you could stop sharing, Melvin, that would be awesome.
Okay.
All right, so 2 more speakers, so hang in there. You don't want to miss these great speakers. Our next speaker is Marcelo Gallardo, and he's a senior solution architect at TIBCO. He's worked on a variety of projects using many of our TIBCO solutions and open source. He's currently working on some projects around event processing and the IoT. He resides in Florida, so our very last fun fact of the day is Florida. Yes, it has the most consecutive days of sunshine than any other state in the United States, but it also has the highest rate of lightning strikes per capita in the United States. So as you're enjoying the sunshine, you might get hit by lightning. But anyway, so Marcelo is going to talk about open source project, another open source project from TIBCO called Project Air, which Melvin alluded to, which really shows using open source how to collect and process and visualize IoT data. So Marcelo, I'll take it away.
Thank you, Penny. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Marcelo Gallardo and I am a member of the TIBCO Labs team. In this section, I will give a quick overview of Project Air and actually will demonstrate some of its capabilities. So let's get started. Some confidentiality and disclaimer notice first. So let's talk about edge computing. So what it is a distributed computer that brings computation nearer to the source of the data. In this picture, we can see that without edge computing, data is transferred to the cloud for processing. The main issue with this approach is that a lot of data is transferred and there is an increased latency and opportunities and threats that can be missed. If we go to the next slide, with edge computing, data is processed close to the source, and the data can still be transferred to the cloud if needed. Opportunities and threats are identified locally, and action can be taken immediately. The main advantage of this approach is data is transferred only if needed, and with reduced latency. More timely responses can be achieved. So what is Project Air? So it is an open source initiative from the TIPCO Labs program. It aims to bring intelligent insights from IoT devices to the boardroom. This is accomplished by allowing users to easily register and interact with any kind of IoT device. It allows to process the device data at the edge or at the cloud or wherever it is needed. It also allows be able to run on any edge device or cloud provided by that matter, and also allows it to store and analyze data as needed, and allow you to extend every layer of the architecture for easy integration with any other platform. So what is the Air value proposition? So interacting with devices and processing data at the edge results in better automation, cost reductions, risk reduction and visibility, easy and active customer engagement, and low latency and increased performance. So in summary, Project Air provides capabilities for connecting to devices and processing the data, managing the data from the devices, creating triggers and flows to respond to IoT events, store the data into long-term big data repositories for historical analysis and analytics, and also provide means for visualization of the IoT data, and also providing a customizable user interface to monitor, measure, and react to the IoT events. And finally, also we provide using ML models to evaluate IoT data and determine issues and opportunities. So how is this accomplished? So Project Air architecture is a layer on top of the Linux Foundation HX framework, and has components that can run at the edge, on premise, or at the cloud. So HX consists of 3 layers. At the bottom of the HX architecture lies the device services, and those services are the edge connectors interacting with the devices. Those services translate information coming from the devices via multiple protocols and formats that bring them into the HX. In other terms, the device services converts the data into a common HX data structure, and sends that converted data into the core services layer and the other microservices of the HX architecture. The core services layer, which is the middle layer on the HX architecture, provide the glue between the north and the south sides of the HX. The core services is where the device metadata, the collected sensor data, and the HX configuration resides. And at the top of the HX architecture, the top layer is the application service layer. That's where it provides the means to get data from HX to be processed at the edge, and or to be sent to external systems or applications. A high-level view of the project air architecture, we can see going from left to right, and also the right box, the red dotted box is what the project is all about. So going from left to right, we can see on the left, we have the devices, and then we will have a HX framework where that can be, in most of the cases, is located at the edge, but it can also be located at the cloud for certain scenarios, like for example, for data coming from mobile devices. But in most scenarios, the gateway will be located at the edge, and that's where the most a part of the project air components will be running. And here we have in this purple box, that's where the HX components, the HX containers will be running, and also the air components that will be created, and I will show that momentarily. On the right, we also, these components are usually on the cloud, and those are consist of enterprise applications, and also the project air applications that will be created using the user interface that I am going to show next. Those applications can receive data from these data flows and to be used for machine learning, for data analytics, or for consumption by any other application in the enterprise. Next, let's jump into the demo quickly. Let me stop sharing for a second, and I will share now my whole console so that we can see better the demonstration. So here, as I mentioned, Project Air provides an easy way to manage devices and also create logic data flows using that data coming from the devices. So when you get started with the user interface, the first thing that you get presented is a dashboard that shows you the different group of devices that you are managing. In this scenario, I am managing one group of devices that's located in my house, and I call it Hello World Group. On this group, you can do several things. The first thing, you can inspect the different devices by clicking here on the view details, or you can also go here to the pipeline icon, and that will bring you an editor where you can create business logic using the data coming from the devices. And also, before going into creating the data logic, we have a page where you will be able to create connections to different endpoints that your data flow needs to connect. So let's start inspecting the view details page. So in this page, when you click it, you are shown a list of the devices that you are managing. So in this case, I have two simulation devices in this case. One that is called REST device, which provides a REST interface to simulating a device that is receiving data from the sensors using a REST protocol. Or we have another device also that uses MQTT as the protocol communicating with the sensors and managed by this device. So when you click on a specific device at the top on the right, you can see the different sensors. So here we have called these sensors just by the type of the data type that sensor is emitting. So for example, here I have an integer 16 reading. So when I click that, we are presented with some metadata about that sensor, like it will give me the data type, what permissions that sensor has, if it has read-only, or if you can write back to that specific sensor, it will give you the minimum values, maximum values, and things like that. And at the bottom also, we're presented with a chart where we can see the data that the model is actually, the sensors are actually emitting. So right now, we don't have anything on this sensor, so we'll go back to our dashboard, and then we'll go to the pipeline. And actually, since I don't have too much time, I won't show you how to define the connections, but here I will quickly show you how to define a basic pipeline. So the first thing you are presented is an empty canvas where you can start laying down the the data flow, the data logic that you want to specify. So the first thing you usually do is subscribe to data. And in this case, we want to subscribe to data coming from the devices. In this case, we define previously two protocols, one that is called, defined for the messages coming from the devices, that's called Edge MQTT. So we select that and we can see here the parameters that were pre-configured. And then on the next, we create a data publisher. So in this flow, we are going to select to send the data to our Air MQTT broker. And that is we have applications that this UI application is actually subscribing to data coming from this channel to display and show here on the UI. So the only thing that we are going to do here is very simple. We are receiving data from the sensors and then publishing to MQTT data store. Okay, so once that we have that simple logic laid down, so we can give it a name. So we can call it this basic pipe. And we'll put it as a type of H. And we're going to use the Air deployer to deploy this application. So once that we have configured that business logic, we can save this pipeline. And now at this point, this data logic is ready to be deployed. In this case, we will deploy this logic to this machine where I am running the demo, but it can be deployed, as I mentioned previously, can be deployed to other machines on the edge, or it can be deployed to the cloud. So let's click deploy pipeline. Wait, before I do the deploy pipeline, I want to show you here, I have the Docker dashboard, which is showing the different containers that made up the project Air. So here we can see the HX components that are running here, and also some containers from project Air. These are the components that actually implement the deployment of the containers that I am going to deploy right now. So here, when I click the deploy button, what is happening is that we are saving this configuration and we are sending to our deployer service. This deployer service gets this configuration and converts this configuration into a Flow application. Once that the Flow application is ready, it is converted into an executable for the platform that we are deploying. So for example, if we are deploying to a Raspberry Pi, it will be, the executable will be created to be able to run on a Raspberry Pi. And after the executable is created, the deployer, containerize the executable, and then that is what is deployed. So let's do that. Let's click deploy. So behind the scenes, everything that I just described is happening, and we should be able to see shortly, as you guys can see here, the container that I just created was created here. We can see the ID 325887. And that's exactly the ID that we have here for the pipeline that we created. So now that this process that is containerized and is running, now we can test it. So let's use Postman. We will simulate some data sending to a REST endpoint. That's the REST device that we are using. So here we're going to send a few values here. Let's put 200 and let's send it. Let's send 500 and let's send it. And let's also do another value, 600, and let's send that value. So now that we have sent the data coming from the devices went through this process, and now since we send this to the Air channel, which the UI is using to receive data, we can go to the details again of this device, click on the REST device, and then I can click on the integer 16 reading, and we can see the values. Here we can see this value is 200. This value should be the next value, the 500, and then 600. Those are the values that I just simulated sending my Postman. Let me see if I have a few more minutes. So let me create another pipeline a little bit more interesting. So let's say we have a source of data. Let's say it's a camera that is sending pictures. And then we want to be able to determine what is that picture by sending that image to a model that will predict what the picture is. So let's do that. Let's create, before that, let's undeploy this, whatever we have running right now. So we just select the pipeline and we click undeploy. So we can quickly see here in the Docker container, this process will go away in a little while. As we can see, the container just disappeared from the Docker container because I undeployed. So now let's create a new pipeline and let's start with the data subscriber. Again, let's select we want to listen to the events coming from Edgex. And the next activity we're going to select is an inferencing activity. So in this inferencing activity, we can select different models that we have deployed using Project Air also, and they are already running on a different machine. Actually, this is running on a Raspberry Pi. And I am going to select the model I want to use for this. In this case, I have deployed two models, one for image recognition and another one to detect sound failures as we listened on a previous session. So let's select the image recognition model. And next, we need to select what do we want to feed to the model. So in this case, we want to feed the input from the REST device. And we want to listen here to whatever the REST device or the image reading for that device. And that's all you need to do for the configuration. You can connect the two activities. And then we want to send, again, the results and actually the image we want to send to our UI using the Air channel. So we select the Air MQTT here. And we'll configure also that there's another tab on the publisher that will allow us, here the default is just publish the original reading, but we also want to publish the enriched reading, which is the result from the inference. So that's what we want to publish, and that's it. So we will call it this inference pipe. And we also want to deploy to the edge, and we want to use the Air deployer. So again, we can save this pipeline, and then we can again deploy the pipeline. So this will take a few seconds. We'll wait here until here it is, the new container is created, and we can see it on the Docker dashboard. So right now, what we can do is, again, we can simulate data sending to this data flow. The data will be received, the image will be sent to the model will evaluate and it will give us a prediction of what is reading, and then we will send and see it in the UI. So let me bring again Postman, and here for this one, I am going to post an image value. And here I have selected, I have an image from a car in my machine, so that's what I am going to send as the body to this simulation. So let me send this. So right now I have sent that image. So right now, if I go to my view details again from my device, if I click here on the image reading, here it is. I can see the image is the car, and actually here is the result from the model. So the model was able to predict that this is a sport car. This is the class of the image that was detected, and the confidence was 96%. So it's a pretty good model that was able to detect this. So as you guys can see, you can create and use the data coming from devices very easily without any coding. So it's very easy to learn the tool, and also very easy to use data that's from IoT devices. I think I don't have time for anything else. So that concludes my demonstration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcelo. Really awesome demonstrations. Okay, we are to our very last speaker of the day, which ironically was our first speaker of the day. So, just Nelson will wrap this up. The topics will be, as you can see, about some of the latest things everyone's talking about, Web3, NFTs, much more. So again, Nelson is our global CTO at TIBCO. So take it away.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And you see here, share my screen, of course. And in theory, that worked. So hopefully you can see my screen okay. All right. Last session of the day. Always exciting, always a good place to be. So we thought we'd end the day by talking a little bit about blockchain trends, some of the things that we're seeing as it pertains to the industry, and also how a lot of these trends can actually be applied to the enterprise. So with that, just going to jump ahead a little bit now. We know that blockchain still receives a large amount of attention when it comes to just the industry in general and a lot of the enterprises that we work with. Obviously, there's a lot of focus around things like NFTs. There's a lot of work being done with cryptocurrencies and decentralized finance. There's a number of these use cases that we're definitely seeing show up in the industry today. And a lot of these are also applicable to our enterprise customers. So the analysts do see this as a growing trend. There's always the fear, if you will, of some hype around this particular technology. For a while there, blockchain was seen as the answer for everything, which of course is not the case. But there are some really interesting use cases that are emerging where blockchain can definitely fit into your overall enterprise architecture. So one of those use cases is really around decentralized finance. Now, this is really the idea of bringing programmable financial products and services to the decentralized world. So take a lot of those financial products that exist currently today with your more traditional financial models and bring those into the world of decentralized exchanges, decentralized structures, really take these financial functions and decompose them into smaller reusable pieces. And so this is really a large part of where the DeFi world is headed. Provide these financial products and services to the decentralized world and really make them available to anybody that effectively has a wallet and an internet connection. So reduce a lot of those barriers to entry and really help a lot of people gain access to financial products and services that they maybe didn't have access to before. Now, some of the challenges of this, though, of course, is that there's still a lot of legal and regulatory hurdles. So governments are trying to figure out what decentralized finance means. A lot of the traditional organizations in the space are trying to figure out what this means for them. So there's a large number of legal and regulatory hurdles that are being put forward as people try and sort through this. The space itself is immature. It's largely unregulated. And so there's a lot of concerns around things like hacking. There's some considerations around network performance, transaction costs, and really what I call short-term fragmentation. You have a whole bunch of solutions that are showing up. The DeFi space is actually quite packed with a number of startups and capabilities and solutions and frameworks and tools and all this kind of stuff. It really makes it somewhat complicated, especially for people that are not dealing with DeFi on a day-to-day basis. But definitely an interesting trend to watch and definitely something that a lot of my enterprise customers are really looking at to see where and how that might impact them. Now, another trend, of course, that we've been talking about and hearing about for a little bit of time now is around tokenization. So this is the idea of having different types of tokens. These tokens could be governance tokens. These could be asset tokens. These could be fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens. There's a lot of different token types. But these, again, are programmable entities best represented and run typically on a blockchain network that are self-describing, decentralized, transparent, and really can be used to represent almost anything digital or physical. So tokenization is really a great opportunity for the enterprise. How can you implement these tokens, these NFTs, these fungible tokens, governance tokens, and so on? How can you bring those into your business models and really use them to extend what you're doing, again, in terms of products and services to your customers? Now, if you notice, the challenges here are exactly the same challenges that I had on the previous slide. Right? There's legal and regulatory hurdles around the use of NFTs and other types of tokens. It is immature, it's largely unregulated. And again, you have concerns around things like network performance, transaction costs, hacking, and again, there's a lot of solutions that are emerging out there. All right, so again, very interesting space, definitely applicable to the enterprise, something that we are watching. Now, there are different types of tokens, and I've alluded to a few already. Two of the most common types that people will talk about are either fungible tokens or non-fungible tokens. Fungible tokens are things like Bitcoin. They represent a asset essentially that's indistinguishable from another Bitcoin. Right? One Bitcoin is the same as another Bitcoin. You really can't tell the difference. It's divisible. It's non-unique. There's more than one Bitcoin, if you will, and it can be uniformly accepted and interchanged. Right, so there is a large part of that that you can definitely see. The other aspect of this is a non-fungible token. So non-fungible token are things like music, art, right? That those are the items that people have often seen, and those are the items that are really in the news mostly these days. And so those are indivisible, they're irreplaceable, they're more unique programmable assets. Okay. So as far as use cases go, there's a number of different use cases where you can apply tokens. The tokens themselves can be used in gaming, they can be used in supply chain, they can be used in real estate, they can be used in identity. There's a lot of different areas in which tokens themselves can be used. So a lot of use cases that are out there, a lot of ways in which we can apply the concept of tokenization. Self-sovereign identity is another one. Self-sovereign identity is really focused on bringing identity back into the hands of the individual. So instead of giving your identity information away to a number of different websites, instead of going through a IDP like a Google in order to sign into a particular website, you actually take control back. Right? You own your own identity, it's held in a wallet, and you can control how much of that identity you want to share with other organizations. Right? So this is really around this idea of verifiable credentials and self-sovereign identity, decentralized identity, but in essence, it's really bringing identity back to the hands of the individual. Privacy is another area that we definitely see when it comes to blockchain. How can I maintain privacy of information in a decentralized network where I have multiple participants? So this gets into things like, how can I have more directed point-to-point interactions using things like side chains? So having one party talk to another party directly, and then at some point bundling all that up into some form of a transaction and writing that out to a public blockchain, potentially using things like zero knowledge proofs. Right? So how can I really secure the information that is being exchanged and help to make sure that some of it's maintained in a private context? Right. So you'll see a lot of this. You'll see things like trusted execution environments. How can I secure data as it's being processed? So there's a number of different things here that you will see when it comes to the notion of privacy in blockchain. And then lastly, can't mention blockchain these days without talking about Web3 and the metaverse. And so Web3 is really almost like an evolution of the way that we think about the internet today. This is an attempt to move to an environment that is much more open, decentralized, secured, shared by all. Really a situation where the internet is not controlled by a few large organizations. Now, of course, there's a lot of challenges with this. Are you going to be able to replace the entire internet infrastructure overnight? Probably not. The technology stack as it stands today is very complicated. You have issues around interoperability, you have issues around integration. So there's a lot of things here that one needs to worry about when it comes to Web3. But there are a number of technologies here that are very, very interesting, especially as they apply to the metaverse, which you can almost think of as like a series of open virtual worlds where people can now interact freely and even support through the use of things like augmented reality and engage outside of, again, the control of a single organization. So Web3 and the metaverse, definitely another hot topic, definitely something that we are tracking with our customers today. And again, there's a number of technologies associated with that, a number of capabilities that one needs to introduce when you're talking about Web3 and the metaverse. And that, that's a whole other session, but just be aware that the metaverse and Web3 is really a number of different capabilities, not just one or two technologies. Now, the use cases are very vast. the enterprise can use a lot of these concepts and apply them to a number of different areas, whether it's healthcare, whether it's how you're interacting with consumers, whether it's around supply chain, transportation, IoT, government, distributed energy resources. I think I mentioned earlier today, a lot of those things all can be addressed, at least partially, through blockchain or blockchain related technologies. So a lot of use cases that are very relevant that can be applied here to blockchain. And this is a lot of what we're working on in TIBCO Labs. So you've seen a lot around open source. You've heard a lot about different communities. You've heard a lot about different projects. And again, from a TIBCO Labs standpoint, we do see blockchain as being a core foundation of capabilities that the vast community is really working on. So whether it's around different blockchain frameworks, whether it's around consensus algorithms, whether it's around the blending of public and permission blockchain networks, whether it's around smart contracts. We heard the ASX talk about different smart contract languages earlier today, whether it's around side chains or how to increase performance, whether it's around privacy. There's a lot of elements here that the community is working on. And we're really excited to participate in this community, offer some different capabilities in this community, again, in an open source fashion, and really collaborate with our customers and partners on how these can be applied to solve real world business problems. So we have different projects. For example, we have a project we call Project Dovetail, which brings model-driven capabilities to smart contracts that can be applied to different areas such as track and trace and so on, product provenance. So a lot of use cases that, of course, smart contracts can be utilized, tokenization, and so on and so forth. Blockchain analytics are big. So how can you analyze DeFi transactions in order to determine, for example, whether or not fraud is occurring across those transactions? So blockchain analytics is going to be a key element that needs to be addressed. And then finally, blockchain does not exist by itself. So when you're looking at enterprise architectures, blockchain is only one component of that architecture. You have to deal with how you get information back and forth from enterprise systems, back and forth to the blockchain network. How do I handle events that are triggered from the blockchain network? How do I build services and applications around the network? How do I handle things like identity, data privacy? How do I determine what to run on-chain versus off-chain? How do I govern the network? And who's going to manage the network? So there's a lot of considerations here that come into play when you're looking at blockchain. Blockchain is a potential technology piece of the puzzle, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. And so you need to look at your technology architecture very holistically when you're looking at blockchain within your organization. So that's my crash course on blockchain, just to close out the day. Lots of interesting areas. There's a lot of exciting potential and future ahead when it comes to blockchain and blockchain related use cases. Interoperability, integration, analytics, a lot of these capabilities are going to be critical, especially for enterprises looking to adopt and utilize blockchain technology. And as I mentioned, it's not going to exist alone. We really need to work together as a community, open source, enterprise, partners, and so on, and really determine how blockchain will play a key role in the next generation of enterprise applications. And if you want to learn more about a lot of these topics, we do have a book coming out actually that'll go into all the topics that I mentioned, as well as things like distributed ledger technology, consensus algorithms, and even some future concepts as it pertains to blockchain. So if you're interested in picking up a book on this, it should be released probably early summer, kind of the June timeframe. So make sure to check out that link, register, and you'll get a notification as to when the book becomes available. Right, and with that, lots of information out there. But just with that, I just wanted to close out the session today. I really do appreciate everybody attending. I hope you found this information very valuable. Of course, feel free to reach out to us or any of the speakers with any questions that you might have. I do want to thank the speakers because these days would not be possible without them, of course. And I also want to thank the great staff that worked behind the scenes, as well as in front of the scenes, like Penny, to really support this initiative, bring it all come together, and hopefully for everybody, it was a great successful event. So again, thanks to all. Have a good rest of the week. I guess we're getting close to the weekend, but really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you on the next event. Thanks all.
Recording stopped.